As the moon climbs high over dead oak trees, spooks arrive for a midnight spree. Creepy creeps with eerie eyes start a trance and hypnotize. Some begin to mesmerize. There are few ghosts in the haunted mansion more hypnotic than the Ogre. He's one of our Sinister 11, and his portrait hangs in the mansion alongside other members like Count Dracula and Jack the Ripper. His name likely originates from his large, stern appearance. Little is known about this particular spirit outside of whispers and rumors. It is presumed he practiced mysticism or the occult. It's also assumed that the Ogre is just an alias, and perhaps the true identity of this unhappy haunt is none other than the Mad Monk of Russia, Grigori Rasputin. Welcome, foolish mortals, to the Haunted Mansion. Please look alive, because in this story we'll uncover the truth behind one of Russia's most notorious figures.
There lived a certain man in Russia long ago. He was big and strong, in his eyes a flaming glow. Most people looked at him with terror and with fear, but to Moscow chicks, he was such a lovely dear.
Rasputin was born in the Russian Empire on January 21st in the year 1869. He lived a pretty typical life as far as Siberian peasants go. He received no formal education of any kind. He is said to have been unruly in his youth, guilty of theft, and possibly coming into conflict with authority figures. He married right after his 18th birthday. The couple had 7 children, of which only 3 survived into adulthood. A decade later, Rasputin went on a pilgrimage, possibly inspired by a spiritual crisis of some kind. After a visit to St. Nicholas Monastery, he'd cast off his old life, learning to read and write, and studying holy texts. Grigori Rasputin was described as a very interesting and charismatic individual despite his disinterest in hygiene. He rarely bathed or changed clothing. His most defining characteristics were his long, disheveled beard and his gray-green eyes that bore into you. He'd stare right into your eyes as if to put you into a trance. His admirers were almost transfixed when he spoke.
There is no thought, nothing. Only my eyes. No sleep.
By the 20th century, he had collected a group of followers who'd gather in a small chapel. Many villagers grew suspicious of Rasputin as rumors circulated about ritual floggings and an odd tradition where some of his followers would ceremoniously wash the mad monk before each meeting. In St. Petersburg, Rasputin's reputation had garnered some interest as the aristocracy at the time were often obsessed with both the occult and the supernatural.
Evil, all-powerful, all-terrifying, evil to seek you out and destroy. Now, guys and gals alike, disguise yourself from the most inhuman creatures ever to frighten the wits out of you. Get your Rasputin beard free as you enter the theater to see Rasputin, the Mad Monk!
He was brought into several prestigious circles before being invited to the palace to pray over the Tsar's son Alexei in spring of 1907. By the next morning, the boy had almost completely recovered. The royal family's belief in Rasputin's healing powers brought him considerable status and power at court. Many Russians felt his relationships with the royal family was quite odd. He'd frequently be accused of indiscretions and even heresy. As his influence over the royals increased, it led some people to consider something more drastic. In 1914, a 33-year-old peasant woman, believing that Grigori Rasputin was a false prophet, attempted to assassinate the mad monk by stabbing him in the stomach just outside his home. The wounds were serious, and physicians weren't sure he'd survive. Some news outlets even prematurely reported his death. After some time in the hospital, Rasputin would miraculously recover. However, this was only the first assassination attempt made on his life.
He has the Tsarina in his absolute power. Under hypnosis, he can make her do whatever he wishes. Do you understand what that means? He must be destroyed before he destroys us all.
Then one night some men of higher standing set a trap they're not to blame. Come to visit us, they kept demanding, and he really came.
In December of 1916, a group of nobles invited Grigori Rasputin to a gathering. If the rumors are true, Rasputin was offered tea and cakes laced with cyanide. The poison seemed to have no effect on the mad monk. He drank 3 glasses of poisoned wine, but still no sign of distress. Growing impatient, one of the conspirators located a firearm and shot Rasputin in the chest. After some time, they checked his body to ensure his demise. That's when Grigori Rasputin seemed to resurrect himself in order to attack his assailant. 2 more shots were fired into the mad monk before he collapsed. His body was wrapped in cloth and tossed into a frozen river. I have to admit, I love happy endings, don't you? But wait, there's more.
Mark my words. You and your family will die within a fortnight. I will not rest until I see the end of the Romanov line forever!
During his life, Rasputin had prophesied that if he were to die, or if the royal family deserted him, their son Alexei and their crown would be gone. Just a few months later, a revolution began in Russia. Months later, the entire Romanov family was put to death by Bolshevik revolutionaries. And, unlike what you may have heard in fairy tales, there were no survivors. There have been 2 portraits of the ogre produced for the Haunted Mansion. Take a moment to gaze upon the original by Imagineer Mark Davis. It bears a striking resemblance to Grigori Rasputin. It was meant to appear as one of our changing portraits. As a viewer stares into his eye would expand and combine into one all-seeing eye. But the portrait that most mortals would be familiar with features a bearded man whose eyes follow guests as their doom buggy floats by. Oh, that reminds me. Your carriage has arrived to carry you into the boundless realm of the supernatural. Once on board, remain safely seated with your hands, arms, feet, and legs inside your doom buggy. And remember to subscribe to Retro Spectrum so you won't miss a single video highlighting the residents of the Haunted Mansion.